everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Stacy Sattung with the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining us today. Our webinar is titled Landlord Tenant Mediation Toolkit and Grant RFP Relief. That's a mouthful. To let you know, this presentation is being recorded and will run approximately 60 minutes, including question and answer time. We will send you a link via email to the recording within a few days, as well as upload it to our YouTube channel and our website. Attendees will be muted during the presentation. If you have questions for the presenters, please type them into the Q&A box in the bottom of your screen. If you have a logistical question for the Housing Alliance staff, please use the chat feature. The chat feature should not be used for questions for the presenters. I'll now turn it over to Phyllis Chamberlain, Executive Director of the Housing Alliance, to begin today's presentation.
Great, thanks, Stacy, and hi, everybody. I hope everybody is safe and well. As Stacy said, today what we're going to share with you is the Housing Alliance's continued effort to support your work locally to prevent evictions for the many people who have been impacted by COVID-19 related job loss. We're going to walk you through a toolkit that we have developed, which helps you identify steps to create a landlord tenant mediation program. And then we're also going to talk about an RFP for some small grants to support 5 communities in creating a landlord tenant mediation program. So when the stay-at-home order was first put in place here in Pennsylvania, which was about mid to late March, I remember thinking after a week or two had passed, ugh, we're gonna be stuck at home until at least June. And at the time, that seemed like an eternity. Well, here it is, mid-August, and there doesn't seem to quite be an end in sight yet. For those of us who are lucky enough to be able to work from home, certainly that can be challenging, especially if you're a parent. But for those too many Pennsylvanians who can't work from home and were laid off or had their work hours reduced, the end definitely doesn't seem to be in sight. And we're concerned that that end is going to result in eviction. So many of the people who've lost their jobs weren't making much anyway in terms of low wages. Many of them are renters. We know that there has been a lag in unemployment benefits in terms of receipt of the actual money for the people who are eligible for unemployment. We know there's a lot of people who aren't eligible. At the federal level, up until the end of July, there was an additional $600 that people were receiving a week in addition on top of what they would have been receiving through unemployment. So that additional $600 per week is fairly significant, particularly if you weren't making that much money before. We know that there have been more people unable to pay their rent, but we remain concerned that we're heading to a cliff. With the eviction moratorium here in Pennsylvania set to expire August 31st, we do hope that that is extended. But whether or not it is, an eviction moratorium only keeps people from being thrown out of their homes. And in that time, the rent is still due. So we remain really concerned about a huge increase in the number of people who are going to be experiencing an eviction. Here at the Housing Alliance, we've been really focused on what we can do at the state level and to support your efforts at the local level. We have supported the eviction moratorium, again, to keep people safe in their homes. You cannot stay socially distant from people if you don't have a home, if you have to go into a homeless shelter, or if you have to double up with family or friends because you don't have a place to live. We also, along with many other state organizations and local partners, advocated for more rental assistance. Certainly rental assistance is most of the time the best way to help a tenant keep their housing and not be at risk of eviction. But what we're going to talk about today is an additional strategy that we think is really important to have in place at the local level, which is a landlord tenant mediation program. Gail Schwartz here at the Housing Alliance is going to walk us through, again, both the toolkit that we developed with the help of a lot of people here in Pennsylvania. And then we're also going to talk about the funding opportunity, which we're really happy to be able to funnel these small grants to several communities. And we have Regional Housing Legal Services to thank for making that funding possible. Most of you probably know Cindy Daly, who was the policy director here at the Housing Alliance. She left the Housing Alliance a few years ago to return to Regional Housing Legal Services. We're thankful for her partnership, not just on this, but Cindy has been a great friend to the Housing Alliance since she left, and to me personally, for her dedication to the issue, along with her great knowledge of the housing sector here in Pennsylvania. So Cindy's going to say a few words, and then we'll pass it along to Gail to talk about the toolkit and the RFP. Cindy, without further ado.
Thank you, Phyllis. That was a lovely introduction. And yes, the Housing Alliance is and always will be near and dear to my heart. For those of you who don't know, Regional Housing Legal Services provides free legal assistance to nonprofit community organizations that are working to expand affordable housing opportunities. We also engage in policy initiatives to explore aspects of safe, affordable, stable homes. Recently, we were fortunate to receive a grant from the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network of Coronavirus Relief Fund money for legal aid. And we're using some of that to partner with the Housing Alliance to help communities establish mediation programs. We hope this results in landlords and tenants finding alternatives to evictions and allowing more people to remain in their homes. So I'm looking forward to hearing today's webinar. And thank you at the Housing Alliance. Thank you also all for joining.
Great, thanks, Cindy. And now I'm going to pass it to Gail.
Thank you. Thank you to Phyllis and Cindy and to everybody who took the time to get on today's presentation. I am going to share my screen so we can walk through the toolkit together. I do have to say that this toolkit really was a community effort. I think eviction prevention is a community effort and all aspects of it. And eviction is a complex issue that is going to require different strategies to really help stem the tide of evictions, the tsunami of evictions that we are all fearful of. And so with that, I just want to again acknowledge all of the people, and there were so many people who contributed to this toolkit. So which is why the first page of this toolkit really is the acknowledgement of people who really did help create this toolkit. This toolkit really started back in, I think it was May. We had a webinar on landlord tenant mediation where we highlighted the existing models in Pennsylvania, which are currently in Philadelphia and in Pittsburgh. So there was many folks from those communities who came and shared what they were doing and how they framed it. You know, we also had representation from the Pennsylvania Mediators Council to really help do some level setting and education around mediation. We had some really amazing grassroots advocate come and join us who was doing the tenant support in Philadelphia. So we really saw a lot of different sectors coming together to highlight what they were already doing. And then that conversation continued through a series of what we called peer learning exchanges on mediation. So we had 60 people representing about a dozen communities across Pennsylvania who were continuing to meet after that webinar to talk through funding ideas, to talk through how, again, sort of, what does it mean to be a formally trained mediator? How is that different than some of the mediation that's already taking place in programs? And also really talking about that need for tenant support and education and making sure that when people are going into mediation that they are adequately prepared to understand what their legal rights are in this situation, and then also getting connected to the critical resources that can stabilize the housing situation. More often than not, when a housing situation goes bad, it's because there's somebody with an unmet need. And if we can meet the needs, the basic needs, the housing stabilization will follow. So we really want to make sure that we're, connecting to critical people and critical resources. So again, these are all the folks that either presented on a webinar or participated in helping facilitate these peer learning exchanges. This was tons of work. We also, in the process of our research at the Housing Alliance, reached out to communities all across the country, from Massachusetts to California. And everybody we talked to, everybody we reached out was, yes, let's help each other. Let's learn, let's share. It's just really, really amazing how open people are to supporting and helping one another, which is really just fantastic and inspirational to see in such challenging times. So with that, I want to go into the toolkit itself. The reason we are releasing the toolkit and the RFP for the grant opportunity together is we do believe that this toolkit gives you the roadmap to what we want to see communities submit their grants on. Again, things don't have to be like 100% a certain way. We really wanted to frame this as these are the core building blocks in which you can build your local mediation program. We recognize that there are lots of different communities that are having this conversation, that are in different phases of this conversation. And we really wanted to create a resource and a funding opportunity that can meet you where you're at in your local conversation. So with that, we sort of framed this as, here are the building blocks. We have block one is convening. Again, nobody can do a mediation program alone. It takes a lot of different stakeholders with a lot of different expertise. Block two is educating. We spent a lot of time here at the Housing Alliance educating ourselves, and then through our peer learning exchange, educating our membership. What is mediation? What is a formal mediation program? How is that different than, maybe your homeless assistance housing navigator helping to mediate some tension between a landlord and tenant in a brief situation? And really looking at, how are the models of these programs structured across the country? And they can vary greatly, and we, expect that they will vary greatly within Pennsylvania, because each community does have, is unique. Then our third block is, we really want you to design a program and really have, just a couple of key components. And then, of course, getting the word out. It's Amazing resources can flounder if there isn't a good outreach strategy. So we wanted to give some guidance and, of course, sample materials on that. So within each block of the toolkit, you will find tools such as fact sheets that really talk about each block, as well as things that we think are going to be helpful to you in really thinking through this problem, especially if you are already to the point in your process where you're soliciting grants from a more traditional funder than us, and you need to develop a statement of need and make a more robust grant application than what we're going to be asking for, which I'll go over later. But again, we have fact sheets, we have articles and memos, and really everything that we hope that you will need for helping to build your successful program. So I'm just going to go over the fact sheets really quickly. The first one is block 1, convening local partners. You really do want a diverse group of stakeholders involved in this process. You do want the social service community, you want tenant advocates, you want legal services at the table. You also, it's really important to bring landlords along as well, and local courts, civil leaders, you know, anybody who has a vested interest in preventing eviction. And I personally think everybody has a vested interest in preventing eviction. You really want to get them at the table, circling around this process. And eviction is a complicated process. It's not a singular event. I did some outreach to some researchers based out of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and I recently learned in all of 2019 across Pennsylvania, we had nearly 99,000 eviction filings in 2019, which is a staggering number. So even before COVID-19, we had a real crisis on our hands, and that crisis has only been compounded by the pandemic. But eviction is complicated and it's overwhelming, and it's, you know, particularly overwhelming for tenants, but it can also be overwhelming for landlords as well, especially since a large number of landlords in Pennsylvania are not big corporations with, you know, lawyers on retainer, but they really are small owners and operators that may be doing this on the side and don't always have, you know, the full understanding of landlord tenant law and the eviction process. So we definitely wanted to map the process. Again, this is a very, very general map, as general as we could make it for the 66 counties in Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia. Philadelphia has another process, but they also already have a mediation program, so we didn't include a map for that. But we do want to say that when thinking about eviction in your local community, it is really important to get connected to legal services in your community and to courts in your community to make sure that you can customize this map that really reflects what your local county court regulations, rules, and procedures outline. And then again, we have lots of articles and things that you can reference for helping to make the case why we need to convene people. And then we go into block 2. In block 2, we really want to start with the education of stakeholders. Again, this is looking at models from across the country, across the state and across the country. We do believe this toolkit to be a living document, so we are going to be updating it in the months and potentially years to come as we think about recovery. But this is, just a beginning of looking at the different programs that are in communities like Ohio and Massachusetts and California, as well as Pennsylvania. How are they funding it? How are they supporting tenants? Because we know like a simple mediation meeting alone may not be enough to stabilize the housing situation. And then we also look at, again, we really want to educate stakeholders on what mediation is, how mediation is different than other court-based interventions like litigation, arbitration. Again, mediation is something that it's a conversation that's facilitated by a neutral party. That neutral party, that neutral mediator has, gone through a very specific training to become a mediator. Some states have certification. Pennsylvania does not have certification, but there is still guidance and state law that governs how mediation should be handled. There is, confidentiality requirements when it comes to mediation. And also, again, there's a whole network of mediators out there. There's a whole sort of industry around mediation that really has professional standards that really guide how this service is delivered generally, and then of course within the landlord-tenant framework. So we have that information provided, and then again more research and articles to help support the case and continue the education. Then we get into designing the program, and we really see a strong holistic landlord-tenant mediation program having 4 components. First is, having a formal mediator that is really trained in accordance with, the national standards around mediation. We do think that there needs to be some sort of housing counselor component, case management, tenant advocate. I mean, it can be under many different names, but it really is somebody who can help prep the tenant and the landlord too, if it's needed, on, what does the law say, reviews the lease with either side, really just helps them prepare for the meeting, for the mediation session, making sure that they're informed about all of their options and what would be the result or the consequence of whatever option they chose for. Where are the areas that they can give a little bit of ground, and where are the areas that you cannot give a little bit of ground. We also believe that there needs to be wraparound supports. Again, the number one reason for eviction filings is non-payment of rent. We know that there's an affordable housing crisis, and we know that even, especially in COVID-19, that as people are returning to work, if they're returning to, a job as a bartender or a waitress or a hairdresser or something like that, where they may be able to make rent going forward, they may not have the resources to cover the arrears that they amass. So there still might need to be some sort of wraparound support. And of course, there could be other issues going on related to health, related to employment, related to mental health, domestic violence, criminal justice. So we just want to make sure that people are getting connected to resources. And again, there's also resources out there for landlords to help them improve the quality of the unit. There are many programs that if a landlord is, working, renting to a low-income tenant, that can qualify them to access resources to make improvements like weatherization or replacing a water heater or roof repair or something like that. And then of course you do need legal support. And, you know, mediators can be anybody. Anybody can go through a mediation training. It does not have to be a lawyer. It could be a counselor. It could be a social worker. I mean, really anybody can be a mediator. But you do want legal support so that you have somebody who can answer any legal technical questions if either the landlord or the tenant does need some legal advice. Legal advice can only be given by a lawyer, so you do want to make sure that there is some pathway to access that in case it's needed. But again, you know, we do want to recognize that mediation itself is separate from legal support. And then, yeah, all this writing just goes into the detail of what I just talked about. And again, we have more research articles in there that really talk about, you know, what is the value of having, especially a housing counselor or tenant advocate. I do have to give a special shout out to Lex Harris from the Tenants Union Network, Resident Network, I think is what it's called, who drafted us a really great memo that really highlighted the value of the tenant advocate housing counselor piece. And then of course, lastly, we do, you know that advertising the program is absolutely critical. Getting the word out, especially right now, is just challenging. There's so much information happening. There's so much news happening. Getting through the noise of all of the information that's going back and forth is really causing everybody to adapt in new ways. And especially when some of our tried and trusted methods are no longer feasible, which is kind of, you know, that relationship at community events, really talking about these programs. So again, we really listed, you know, who do we see as trusted messengers for each of these groups. Where are some locations where we know people are still able to go a little bit to find information and get information. You know, we do know coffee shops are open and a lot of them have community boards, or whether it's a corner bodega or something like that. Grocery stores are still open and sometimes they have community boards. Hardware, home improvement stores, you know, even at our most severe shutdown, these are all places that are open. We're seeing home and garden shows and conventions are starting to adapt to virtual formats, and this is places where, you know, landlords are still frequenting, so that's a good place to advertise. And you know, laundromats. And then another thing that we've really seen, at least that I've seen, I saw it years ago when I was doing lots of landlord engagement work on the ground in Allegheny County, is Facebook groups. Both landlords and tenants have lots of Facebook groups. And so it actually is a really great way to spread information of just, you know, doing a little bit of research and seeing how people are sharing resources. I've also seen in the wake of COVID-19 and the pandemic, lots of groups have been formed again to just share critical information, resources to help people make sure that they have their basic needs met. And it really is circling around employment opportunities, you know, getting food assistance and getting housing crisis assistance. So again, we really strongly encourage to look at those resources and maximize those resources, and really lean on that, at least during social distancing. We also have examples of just printed materials that have been put out by other mediation programs, just to see how they've kind of talked about mediation, how they framed mediation, how they frame it to be a benefit to both landlords and tenants, is really, really critical. So all of that information is also in here. And then last, we have an appendix, which again, we have lots of sample forms and tools that have been created by other mediation programs, the model programs that was noted earlier in the toolkit, as well as helpful resources and other research articles that we think can be of value as you work in your community to help build up understanding of landlord-tenant mediation. And then again, you know, sample forms, sort of, you know, housing intake, what are the questions that other programs are asking? How are they framing the conversation? What are the letters that they send out? Just any possible bit of information that we could share, just so that you could, you know, again, not have to reinvent the wheel, so that you could just save time in doing the outreach. We tried to put everything that you could need to get the conversation started, get the program started here in a one-stop shop. So we do sort of have two versions of this toolkit. We have the complete toolkit, which you can see this number up here is a robust 107 pages. We do have an executive summary that really just focuses on the fact sheets that we developed, so that you will not have to print out the whole thing just to get a couple of key pages. So when we send out information after that webinar, we will be sending out links to both. And then, so like I said, this is really to help you level set, to help your stakeholders level set, and start to think about where are the building blocks in your community already to get your landlord tenant mediation program up and running. And now I just want to go over and touch on the RFP. So it is a somewhat brief RFP. We, you know, we're different than a normal grant application. We're not going to ask you for, you know, a statement of need. We know the need. We know that the need is everywhere in Pennsylvania. So really, we start out just gathering some basic information. We do want to know what county or counties your organization serves. We are looking for you to write a brief description of the landlord tenant mediation program that you are seeking to create. You know, we do want some specific details that are including but not limited to. We do know that once you get the program fully completed and launched, you know, how many mediations do you intend to do within a specified time frame? And it's up to you to decide like what that number of mediations is and what the time frame is. We just want to get a good sense. And we also want to know the jurisdiction. We know that there are many organizations out there that could be serving multiple counties, but this initiative may only start at the municipal level because that's where the buy-in is. So we just want to be able to know what community you intend to serve with this program. You know, again, we really are looking to see that this is a demonstrated community effort. So we do want to know who are the other organizations and stakeholders at the table. We're not asking for letters of support. We really don't have a mechanism for that to be uploaded. So, you know, all you have to do is list the name and the organization. And we do want to know like where you are in your process. Like I said at the beginning of this presentation, we really are looking to support people where they are at currently. So if you're at the very beginning of the process, that's okay. If you're somebody who's much further along and are hoping to do your first mediation in the next couple of months, that's fine too. For what we're looking at, we're not necessarily prioritizing the person who's going to do the mediation the soonest. We really are looking for a well-rounded, holistic program that is truly a community effort. We do want to know what the target start date for the program is. And then, of course, we do need to know how you will use the funds. We did list some possible answers for how you could use the funds, but if you have an idea outside of this, don't think that it has to be limited to just these questions or just these suggestions. But it is CARES Act relief money, so the funds do need to be spent quickly, even if it's still going to take a few weeks or a few months before your mediation program is ready to launch. And then, of course, we do want to know, have you been involved with the peer exchange learning sessions on mediation? We know there's been a lot of great communities that have been working hard already on this conversation. So we just want to know if you've been involved in that. And then, this grant does not just come with money, it does come with technical assistance and staff support from the Housing Alliance. We do have AmeriCorps Vistas coming on board, and we are hoping that they can help lend capacity to communities to help them get these programs up and running. So we really, really are giving you everything that we have to give to make sure that you can get a really good, well-rounded program up and running that is best suited for your community's needs. So that was a lot of information, and I see that many questions have been coming in. So I am going to ask Phyllis to help me moderate some of the questions. And
great. Thanks, Gail. Before I read a number of the questions, Gail, can you share with everyone when we plan to send out the mediation toolkit and the RFP? Because there are quite a few questions about that.
Yes, so the mediation toolkit and RFP is going to be emailed immediately after this webinar to all folks who have registered and are attending today. So you should get that before the end of the day today. And then we have our newsletter going out tomorrow. It will be included in the newsletter, and both a link to the toolkit as well as the RFP. And we'll probably send a follow-up power mail out as well. If for some reason you don't get it, you can always email me and I can send it to you directly if something. Also, always check your junk folder, maybe got caught up in spam, but that application is open and we are going to be sending out the toolkit as soon as possible.
Great. So this question is about someone just trying to get an idea of what sort of program they might create and what we're looking for. So the question is, we work on a housing first model for families and work with a lot of families and negotiate with landlords. We work with a lot of other organizations, but I'm wondering if creating a program just for the families we enroll is the sort of thing you're imagining, or are you looking for larger, sort of high-profile county-wide programs? Gail, you want to address that?
I mean, I think we do want a program. We do want to see a community-based program. We are going to be sort of prioritizing that particular model. That's not to say that it couldn't start as a collaboration between a couple of social service providers who maybe contracts with a mediator and gets a program going that way. We know that there are some communities that already have like a mediation center present. Other places, they may have to outsource that a little bit. So, and we also know that this is a program that is going to have to start small. So I wouldn't want it just limited to one agency, and I most certainly wouldn't want it all under one agency, all the program within one agency. But if you want to, you know, get a collaboration between multiple agencies and work it that way, I think that there's potential there. There are many communities that are starting at the municipal level. Again, the Philadelphia model even started with just a small sort of $10,000 grant where they just had a couple of mediators who got stipends, and it was out of an existing mediation program. So we do want to see a community effort, but again, how that community is started is flexible. I hope that answers the question.
And of course, if anyone, we still have a few more minutes for additional questions, but certainly if anyone has additional questions, Gail, should they contact you directly?
Absolutely.
Okay. And Gail's email, if you don't have it, but I bet everyone does, is Gail, G-A-L-E, @housingalliancepa.org. The next question is really about the type of agency that should be or could be creating a mediation program. And the question is, we are a housing nonprofit that is also a landlord to 80 tenant households. Is there a conflict of interest that should caution us from being the agency that creates a landlord tenant mediation program?
I would say yes. You know, it's really important that the mediator is neutral, and if they are an employee or getting paid by the landlord, that it could potentially, but again, if depending on how you structure it, or if there's a partnership with a mediation service in your area, or right now, honestly, in COVID-19, a lot of things are happening in conference calls and Zoom formats. So you can start working with mediators that are in other communities. So I think you just have to be really detailed in how you're going to structure it so that there isn't that conflict of interest, and that this is somebody who is a trained mediator. But again, this is sort of why we want to see who are the other stakeholders at the table. Is there a partner agency who could house the mediator that could, you know, again, you could make the agreement to send your residents and your tenants to mediation once it gets up and running. I think we've seen that actually in the Pittsburgh model with their new mediation program. They have made arrangements with affordable housing providers that and made agreements that those providers will utilize mediation for their tenants who are falling behind on rent. So there is some models out there that, again, we can talk more one-on-one. So you can think about how to structure that in a way that will work for you.
Great. So the next question is about data. And the question is there any data that shows a correlation between mediation and decreases in delinquent rent and/or evictions? And Gail, I would actually just suggest to add on to this question, is maybe you could also talk a little bit about how success is defined in a mediation program.
Right. So in mediation, success is often defined as the two disputing parties come to an agreement. And then after that agreement, there is adherence to the agreement, that people actually do what they say that they're going to do. And in looking at models like Philadelphia, like the Palo Alto model, what we're seeing is about 80% of people who go to mediation successfully come to an agreement. Now, the agreement can look very, very different for different situations. And for some people, that agreement may be the tenant still has to move, but they're moving in a timeline that is less traumatic, and they're able to move without it going through eviction court or the constable being involved. So again, so we're seeing about 80% of the time those conflicts are getting resolved. And then in talking to Palo Alto, they said in their aftercare follow-up, about 97% of the time, both sides did what they said they were going to do. So again, that's kind of what the data is showing, and really thinking about, are people coming to an agreement that they feel good about and that they are able to keep to that agreement.
There are a few questions just asking for clarification around the due date, the amount of funding available. Gail, could you share with everyone that information, the due date, amount of funding available?
Yeah, so this application is open now. It will be open until Monday, August 31st. At 5 p.m. the application will close. So everything is due Monday, August 31st at close of business. And the funding is for a $10,000 grant. It's a flat amount that will go to 5 communities.
And it must, the funds must be spent by November 30th, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I just want to share with people that the reason that we have such a quick turnaround time in terms of the application process is that this funding does have to be spent very quickly. But the other reason is that we just wanted to create a somewhat easy application process so that we could get this funding to you as quickly as possible. So for some of you, maybe that's a really short turnaround time. For others, maybe you think that's great. But as you will see from the application, it is pretty simple based on applications that most of us have to do. So again, we're just trying to get you the funding as quickly as possible. Then Gail, can you also clarify when we'll be making the announcements for will receive the funds?
We're hoping to make announcements, depending on how many applications we get, we're really hoping to make announcements within 2 weeks. So that would be the week of September 14th.
Okay, great. Then 2 questions that are both about whether or not you have to be beginning a mediation program or do you have to have an existing program
I would say
in
it's,
place already?
I would say we're open to either. Again, it's not where you are in the process so much as, you know, what is the end product going to look like. We know that some communities have started this conversation sooner than others. We don't necessarily want to see people sort of penalized for that. I mean, we do just want to make sure that we are looking at programs that are going to be incorporating what we see to be the core building blocks and promising practices.
Great. There are a few questions about mediation programs in general, and I'm going to ask those questions, but Gail, can you just share with people the information that we have available already? So there's the toolkit, but then there's also the webinar that we did and the peer learning exchange. So I'm basically answering the question and now asking you to elaborate, because it could be that we at the Housing Alliance could do another webinar or a series for people who are more interested in mediation as you know, how the building blocks of a mediation program. So can you share what we've already done for people?
Yes, so back in May, we did a webinar on mediation and models of landlord tenant mediation programs, where we highlighted the mediation program in Philadelphia, as well as the mediation program in Pittsburgh. And we can most certainly send out links to information about those programs. And then we did peer learning exchange meetings. The webinar was recorded. We did not record or track the peer mediation learning exchange, but I do have some materials from those meetings that can be shared with anybody who needs it. And I can most certainly include a link to the original webinar on mediation.
Great. Part of what is included in the toolkit is information on a statewide group of mediators, and what people could do is work with that group in order to create a local landlord tenant mediation program. This question, Gail, is how can potential mediators be certified? So I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about that group. And then the other part of the question is how long would this take, which I'm not sure if that's about training mediators or if it's about how long an actual mediation takes. So maybe you could address both.
Okay, so in getting training to become a mediator, there is the Pennsylvania Mediators Council offers regular trainings. They usually vary from like 20 to 40 hours. There are also other mediation organizations around the state that also offer mediation trainings. Good Shepherd Mediation in the Philadelphia area just did their first virtual Zoom mediation training, and there's also an organization in Pittsburgh. There's one in State College. Again, if you go to the Pennsylvania Mediators Council website, you can see a listing of community mediation centers. And also you can work with a mediator to come and do a training in your community if that's the route that you want to go. Mediators, again, in Pennsylvania, they do not have to be certified, but they should and do need to complete this course in order for it to be in guidance with both state and national, or in line with state and national guidance. And then we do also strongly recommend that mediators do have some additional education around landlord-tenant issues. So they do have some subject matter context as they go into landlord-tenant mediations. So that is the first question. And what was the second question?
I think I'm not sure I don't remember. I'm not sure I can find it. So if we didn't answer the entire question, we will make sure that it's answered. So after all of our webinars.
Oh, how long does it take? That's what it was. How long does it take? All right, so mediation trainings, and you can see in their toolkit, they vary from 20 to 40 hours. When it comes to a mediation itself, the meeting between the mediator and the two disputing parties, which would be the landlord and the tenant in this case, can take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. You factor in some intake and some pre-mediation preparation, as well as some aftercare follow-up. I would think that a person going through a mediation program would get probably about 5 hours of service spread over time. But the mediation meeting itself, I would give anywhere from 1 to 3 hours.
Great. So as Gail said, right after this webinar, Gail, we're going to send out the toolkit as well as the RFP. If you have additional questions, please contact Gail directly. With the mediation toolkit, as I said and Gail said, we at the Housing Alliance were able to create this toolkit because of the time that many people in Pennsylvania dedicated to helping us understand mediation and then help us break down the steps in order to help you all better understand mediation. I also just want to thank Gail, because Gail has been working really hard. We put together the toolkit really quickly. I personally think it's great. I think it's very thorough, but we did do it quickly. So if you have suggestions, we would really love to hear your feedback. As I said, we're trying to help you create this type of program in your community, and we're trying to take a lot of information and distill it and break it down so that you could do it as easily as possible. We would love to hear feedback. Also, we don't believe that there are very many types of mediation programs here in Pennsylvania. If you have a program that maybe we don't know about, we'd love to hear about that. So again, please contact Gail on that. If we didn't get to your question, we will answer it when we send out the materials after the webinar. I will say that there are a few questions that we might not be able to answer ourselves. Part of what we've been doing here at the Housing Alliance is connecting you to experts in mediation, both here in Pennsylvania and at the national level. So for some of these questions that are a little meatier, we might need to do that in order to answer your question. Thanks for joining. Thanks to Cindy Daly and Regional Housing Legal Services for making the pass-through grants possible. Again, let us know if you have questions, and I hope everyone is safe, and I hope that you are well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.